Hey there, I'm Scott Butwell. Welcome to my channel, and I want to share with you a writing strategy that comes from Anne Lamott's book, Bird by Bird. And this is a really good strategy that I use and you can use when you feel like you're immobilized. You kind of have some fears and stress and anxiety about your writing. And Anne Lamott calls it giving yourself short assignments. And she says the first thing to do if you're starting to feel a little panicky, a little anxious and stressed, obviously the first thing you need to do is to calm down, take some deep breaths. Obviously you can't write if you're in this kind of panicky state of mind. So after you've taken these deep breaths, she says, her writing strategy is to give yourself short writing assignments. And Lamott likes to look at a small 1-inch picture frame on her desk. And this 1-inch picture frame, this by the way is my wife Lisa, that's me when we were a lot younger. But anyway, this 1-inch picture frame is like a metaphor. So when you're writing, you just want to really focus on just 1 inch of a frame in your writing at a time, like one paragraph. And you can see how that makes it a lot easier. It takes away some of the stress and some of the anxiety because you're just focusing on doing one part of your story or one chunk. And I tried this strategy this morning. I was editing a scene I wrote, and I told myself I was just going to focus on just the 1-inch frame of the beginning part of the scene, the inciting incident, the first paragraph. And then after I focused on that 1-inch frame of that part, I just moved on to the next 1-inch frame and then the next 1-inch frame. And so I was just working on one little chunk at a time. You can see how that makes it a lot easier. You're not trying to, focus on the enormity of editing the whole scene or the enormity of the whole book or the whole chapter. You're just working on one little frame at a time. And that is so much easier than trying to think about this whole big task that you have in front of you. That's what freaks you out. That's what immobilizes you when you kind of start thinking too big. She says just focus on one little bit. I kind of use this strategy, by the way, in my own cleaning up. I just focus on one little part of the room at the time, then another part of the room. So it's funny how this cleaning up strategy I have is the same strategy that Anne Lamott recommends for writing. If you're from the pre-digital era like myself, you might think about it like a movie frame. You know, those little film strips. There's just like one strip of film or scene at a time. And so you're just working on that one little strip at a time. That's like a little visual image that might help you. And in her book, Bird by Bird, Anne Lamott gives a great quote from E.L. Doctorow that illustrates this concept of a 1-inch picture frame. So if you're writing a book, this is a great quote. E.L. Doctorow once said that writing a novel is like driving a car at night. You can see only as far as your headlights, but you can make the entire trip that way. You don't have to see where you're going. You don't have to see your destination or everything you will pass along the way. You just have to see 2 or 3 feet ahead of you. Basically, Anne Lamott's 1-inch picture frame and E.L. Doctorow's quote are basically saying the same thing. They basically say you just want to focus in on just a little chunk at a time. Again, you want to focus in on a 1-inch picture frame at a time. Just focus in on that little part, zero in on that, improve that part or write that part, and then you move on to the next part. Of course, you want to think about the overall macro structure of your book. So if you remember last time, in my previous video, I wrote about or spoke about Sean Grid's The Story Grid. And in his book, he really focuses on the macro story structure, beginning hook at the beginning, middle build in the middle part of the book, and a payoff scenes at the end. So you definitely want to be aware of the macro story structure. But once you have the macro story structure in mind, then you can really focus in on narrowing your attention down to these little smaller parts of a scene. And you might be familiar with another story Anne Lamott tells. It's about her brother when he was about 10 years old. and he was really working on this book report on birds. And I think it was due the next day, and he was really struggling and stressing out. He was immobilized by the enormity of this book report, and Anne's dad came over to him, and he said this great advice. He said, "Hey, buddy, just focus on bird by bird." And that's really the same thing that Anne Lamott's saying. Just focus in on this 1-inch picture frame, this one small chunk of your book. Just move into that one little area, then move on to the next area. So bird by bird, one picture frame at a time. It is an incredibly freeing idea, right? Because it takes away the stress. It takes away the anxiety. It'll prevent you from being immobilized by the enormity of the task, right? I want to share one last story from Anne Lamott's book, Bird by Bird. She talks about Bill Murray's movie Stripes. And in that movie, the beginning part of the movie, there's a scene where the sergeant is having the new recruits kind of share a little bit about themselves. And one of the recruits says, "My name is Francis, but I don't like anyone to call me Francis. And if you do call me Francis, then I'm going to kill you." And so the sergeant says, "Francis, lighten up." I think this is really good advice for writing. When you're really writing a book, it doesn't really work when you're all tense and stressed. Writers are like athletes. We need to be kind of calm and relaxed to be able to focus on the creative process. So I like this story in Stripes, how it reminds me that we need to lighten up. We need to relax when we're writing. That's when the words and the story is going to flow. So that's my final thought for you guys. When you're writing, lighten up. And I hope you guys like this video and you find it helpful tool to be able to overcome some of the fear and anxiety that sometimes definitely can creep in when you're writing. If you like this video, don't forget to like and subscribe.